Hey guys, welcome to the first video of my photogrammetry series. I am so psyched to get started with this series, and I know it's quite an anticipated one because there are a lot of people that have asked me to do this because the interest in getting into photogrammetry scanning is huge, and I love that. So there are a lot of information online, like on YouTube, covering how to do photogrammetry, and there are bazillions of ways to do photogrammetry. But I find most of these videos flawed in some way. There are always something that they could have done a lot better, and I've tried to streamline and perfect my process to overcome that. Because usually, you want to have some high quality scans, obviously, but it's also important to be time efficient. You have to be able to produce it fairly fast with the high quality. And I found out that you don't have to choose between quality and speed. You just have to do it the right way. And for those of you who don't know, what is photogrammetry? Well, photogrammetry is when you shoot an object in a load of different angles, and then you have a software to calculate the 3D data out of that by combining the angles and comparing them to each other. There are a bunch of different programs to use. You can have like the free versions like Autodesk 123D, which is cloud-based, or you can have the more professional ones, Agisoft Metashape or Reality Capture. And I will actually focus on the professional ones because I don't see a point of using the cloud-based, cheaper, simpler, or the free versions of softwares in this case, because what we are looking for is quality. And throughout this series, I will go through both programs, Agisoft and Reality Capture. And why I will do that is not only, partly because that was part of my own process, my development process. I started in one end, I ended up in the other, and I want to show you that process. But also because I want you to be able to make your own decisions, because the one program is not necessarily better than the other, and it's good for you to know the differences of them and to be able to make up your own mind of what you want to use. So in this series, I will go through basically from start to finish, where I started doing photogrammetry and where most people do it, basically with a phone and just walking outside and scanning things. And I will go through it step by step to the point where I am today, and also go through all the things that I learned through this process. And there are a lot of questions that we had to cover along the way. Like, do I need like 500 images, or can I do with 50? Do I need like a 35mm, or can I use an 80mm? Do I need prime lenses or zoom lenses? Do I need tripods? Do I need special lighting like softboxes and stuff? What is cross-polarization, and do I need it? Do I have to spend a fortune on gear? And stuff like that. To quickly answer the last question, no, you don't have to spend a fortune on gear, but if you do, you will get better results. The quality is a direct result of what gear you're using. So without further ado, let's begin. So this would be a very common place to start when you don't have any specific gear. You would walk outside and just start shooting with your phone. Like this, in all different kinds of angles, and up and down. And there are a couple of problems with this. So you are very depending actually on the lighting, because you don't want to have sunlight, because when you're doing photogrammetry, you want to have your model unlit, basically. You don't want to have any lighting on it. And right now, if I would capture this right now, I would get the sunlight and the shadows baked into the texture. So shooting outside, you are very weather dependent. And another issue is that even though phones are actually really good today, they're not really good enough. So if you're not going to shoot with your phone, then what should you use? Well, obviously a real camera. And I'm having a mirror here just to show you because I can't film it. Currently, I am using a Sony A7R3. I have no idea where to... Anyway, so the question is, do you need such an expensive camera? Well, no, you don't. But also, you know how they say that megapixels don't really matter? Well, in this case, it actually does. because the higher resolution images you can get, the more 3D details you can have, and also the bigger resolution textures you can get out of your scans. So yeah, you can absolutely use a cheaper camera and you can get amazing results out of that too. But just bear in mind that it does affect the quality. So what about lenses? You have prime lenses, you have zoom lenses, you have wide angle, you have tele lenses. What is the best choice for photogrammetry? Well, I've basically tried them all. Here's an 80mm, 18mm, here's a 50mm macro, here's a 35mm, 85mm, 28-75 zoom lens, a 100mm macro, and a 105mm. Actually, I haven't used this. I just I wanted to show it because it's so. Anyway, don't use that. What is the best choice? I have realized by trying them all that it doesn't really matter. What I have learned though is that it does actually affect the depth of field, because if you use a lens with a smaller field of view, like the 50mm, you will actually have shorter depth of field. And I thought it would be the opposite. Actually, maybe it is, now I'm thinking about it. But what you want to have when you're doing photogrammetry is you want to have as much depth as possible, so you don't want to have any blur on the object you're shooting. So if you're like shooting from up here, you're focusing on this part, you don't want to have this part blurred, because that will ruin your textures or make it a lot harder for you to work the data. So you want to have a lens with as high aperture number as possible. So I thought I could just, yes. Anyway, some of them are like 18, some of them go to like aperture 22. So you want to have as high as possible so you can get as long depth of field as possible. So you can use whatever you want really. You will get some different trades from different kinds of lenses. Like for this example, I get really sharp images, but I can't get close. With this, I can get close, I get really sharp images because it's a prime lens, but I will have issues with depth of field being more blurred than the others. And with this one, for example, I can get really close, I can get good depth of field, but I am getting a little bit worse sharpness. So some of these three, I use that one. Use whatever you want. So my next step is to move inside, and how do you easiest shoot your objects in all different kinds of directions while being inside? You can't just move around the object. So yeah, I got some kind of simple lazy Susan. This is just some kind of IKEA table, rotary table, you can move it around. So basically, you can take a picture, you can move it around, take another picture, move it around. You do it like that, and then you move the camera so you get a higher position, and then do the same thing all over so you get 360 degrees in different heights. But there's still one more problem, because right now I'm having the aperture set to 2.8, which is too low because I will get a lot of depth of field. So I have to change that to as high as possible, which means that I will have to lower, sorry, I'm aiming wrong, which means that I will have to lower the exposure time. And here we have, I need to go down to like 2.5 seconds. You don't want to crank up the ISO because you don't want to induce noise in the images. So keep ISO as low as possible, aperture as small as possible, or in this case as high a number as possible. And then you only have the shutter speed to play with, which means that you will have to go really high. So to be able to capture this now, I will have to shoot it for 2.5 seconds per image. Like that. So you can imagine this takes a long time to move, shoot the image, move. You get the point. So how could I speed up this process? Because we have one more problem here, and that is the lighting. We have this ugly yellow lighting in here. Also, actually, we have shadows, which we don't want to have. So we can solve both the shutter speed issue and the lighting issue pretty easily, and that's to get a flash. So here's the solution, ring flash. Now this is the Godox AR400, which is a ring flash, which Please bear this in mind. There is a difference between ring flashes and ring lights. Now this one has a real strobe flash inside of it, so you get really powerful light. Now there are other LEDs, like LED lights as well, which kind of fill the same purpose. You place the camera here and you get the light directly from the camera, so you will basically remove all the shadows on the object. So to that extent, they do the same job. But please bear in mind that the LED lights, they're not very strong, so you will still have to stop this table between each photo. And I'll come back to that, but it is important. Also, I would suggest that you get one of these. It's a quick release from Manfrotto that you place here, so that way you don't have to screw the camera on and off all the time when you're removing it. So here's that quick release in place, and all I have to do is to place the camera and click it on, and there it sits. Like that. Now you can adjust here, these knobs will adjust the height of this so you can get the lens centered. Now I have to tell you though, this flash, Godox has discontinued it. And I've noticed that it's actually really hard to get this kind of flash right now. There's like these Elinchrom flashes, which are like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times the price. So this one is really, really affordable, and it is discontinued, and they have not replaced it with a new model. So if you want this flash and you can find it anywhere, buy it before anyone else buys it first, because you will not get hold of these. So all I have to do now is to connect the flash to the camera. So I have the PC sync cable there, and just plug it in. And on this side I have the 3.5 millimeter just audio jack. You can have a PC sync as well if you have that kind of cable. So I just turn this on. Now I have f/22, so the highest possible with this lens, ISO 100, and the shutter speed 125th of a second. So if I click this now, did I get focus on that one? Yeah. You can see that we have basically no visible shadows on the object. So the lighting issue and the long shutter speed issue is solved. So now we have another problem, or I mean we had before too, but we haven't solved it until now. And that is that, you know, the principles of photogrammetry is that you walk around the object and the program can, you know, in the difference between angles, it can compare them, and by that read depth data and generate a 3D model out of that. The problem right now is that we are having the camera fixed. So even if we rotate the object, the wall in the background is not moving. And you will not trick the programs. It'll focus on the wall, and it'll be totally impossible to align this point cloud. So there are a couple of solutions to this. Like in Metashape, for example, you can paint your own masks around the object, which takes a lot of time if you're going to do that on 300 images. Another way is that you can remove the object, and you can take a photo of the background like this, and then you add the object, and the program can itself find, you know, it can auto mask the object because it compares with the empty one and it knows what is background and what is object. So that way, that's a workaround, but it's not very efficient. It's not very accurate. I mean, you can get good results of it, but I don't trust it. So the best way we can do is to totally get rid of the background. So here was my solution to this problem. I bought a photo tent, pretty big one. But these come with a background as well, completely black fabric. So I'm not only kind of solving the background issue, but I'm also adding some light, because the light from the flash will bounce in these sides here, and I will have some light coming from the sides of the object. Because when you have the light only from the front, you will get these kind of dark outlines or shadows on the edges of the object, because the light is coming from, you know, such a steep angle. While here, these walls kind of helps illuminating the object from the side and from the top a little bit, not very much, but a little. So if I shoot this now, there is not a lot of features in the background anymore for the program to stick to. And this way it's a lot easier for you to trick the program that the camera is actually moving around the object. It's not perfect. If I zoom in here, you can still see some textures in the background here, so it's not perfect. But you can, in this case, go into Photoshop. If you're shooting RAW especially, always shoot RAW. If you go into Photoshop or Camera Raw, you can just remove the blacks a little bit, so you make this background a little bit darker. There is, however, another solution, and we will come to that in a bit. But for now, there is another problem I want to solve, because I still have to move this table, click, move, click, move, and that takes a lot of time. I don't want to do that. So let's figure that out as well. I'm giving you guys such an easy ride right now because all these problems that I'm solving right now step by step has taken me months to do. And the problem with many like YouTube videos and stuff covering photogrammetry is that they don't actually go through these problems. So even though they can give you the final solution, you won't learn why you had to take care or why you had to think about these things from the beginning. So anyway, let's move on. So to solve this issue with this really time-consuming process, I got myself a rotary table, a motorized rotary table. These are called like Lazy Susan. So I just click this button and it starts to rotate. Now this in particular is making one circle every 32 seconds, and you want to pay attention to how fast they go. Another thing that you can keep in mind, if you go out and Google for these, you will find these tables that are actually made for photography. So they have like a camera trigger built in, so they move a little bit and then they stop, trigger the camera, and then they move a little bit, stop, trigger the camera. And by having one of those, you can easily use a ring LED, ring light, instead of a flash, because you can still have long shutter times. And that is totally okay. You will get good results out of that. But however, I think it takes too long. I want to be time efficient, so I don't want to wait for that to stop and then having several seconds of shutter speed. So by having a table like this that never stops and having a real ring flash, I can shoot these while it's moving like that. You can see that I still get sharp images. Thanks to the real flash, the strobe, I never have to stop the table. Really time efficient. Now the trick here to make this really time efficient is to use the built-in time-lapse feature in the camera. Depending on what camera you have, it might or might not have such a feature, and it might be named differently. In the Sony A7, I have something called interval shooting. So if I can click that, I can turn it on. I can set the interval to 1 second, so it's 1 second between each shot. And because I know that this table takes 32 seconds to go one full circle, I set the number of shots to 32. And now, when I start shooting, it'll just shoot all the images for me. I don't have to do anything. So now we are getting somewhere. Now this is actually becoming efficient. However, now we have another problem, and I could show this to you in the computer, but I don't want to waste your time doing it. I can just explain it basically. So what we have now, if I look at this image, we have this object, which is pretty easy to track, figure out. So this would work pretty well. But let's say I would have an object like this. That is, there's no apparent features they can track. It's just one circular shape. So the programs would have a really hard time aligning these images, because now you have no features to track on the wall. You have no features to track on the table. The only features it can track on to align the images is the object itself. And now you have some texture, obviously, but that is not always enough. There is a couple of solutions. One would be that you can go in the photos afterwards and manually mark control points. which in this case is pretty hard. You have some kind of spots like here that you can add control points on to help it align the images, but that is also manual work, and you want to cut out all the manual work you can. So there is another thing that I tried. So in order to get some more patterns for the program to be able to use to align the camera's position in relation to the object, I tried printing out a cow pattern. So this is just something I found on Google. I just searched for different kinds of patterns, and I found a YouTube channel that recommended a cow pattern. So I found this on Google. I printed out on 2 pieces of paper and just taped them together like this. Also, I added some lines with a ruler here and some circles to be able to easier find the center of the table, so the object wouldn't like rotate around like this. Also, I added some random letters and numbers around here to have additionally some more data for the programs to track and figure out the camera's position. So I just put it on here, put the object there somewhere. This is not aligned in the middle now, but oops. And if I shoot that, we'll now see that I have a lot of features for the program to track and figure out the position of the cameras. However, now there is one more thing that I want to solve before going into Agisoft and Reality Capture to generate this mesh, and that is reflections. Now, reflections is a real problem when it comes to photogrammetry scanning, because if you have an object that reflects a little bit, like the flash or the surroundings, you will have some really hard time aligning the images and figure out the shape, because a reflection, the program will believe that the reflection is part of the shape, even if it's not. And then when the reflection moves, and when the object is turning and the reflection is moving, it'll get confused. You will not get a proper mesh. So it's really important to be able to remove reflections. And there is one way to do that, and that is called cross-polarization.
I'll give my best shot at explaining cross-polarization. I don't know much about it myself, and there might be some fact issues in my explanation, but I will try my best. So basically, when you have a light source, what I do know is that light is electromagnetic waves, and light is traveling. These waves are traveling like this in all kinds of directions. And this is basically, I don't know if you can call this a polarization, but it is a direction at least. So when you have a light source, you have a surface, you have a camera. So when the light is leaving the light source, it is going in all kinds of directions, just like here. And then when it's hitting the surface, it is getting polarized by the surface. So meaning that maybe the blue waves, in this case, waves that are going in one direction, are filtered out partly. So that means that the light that is coming into the camera is already partly polarized. So if you have a polarization filter, just a glass filter that basically allows light from one direction to travel through, but it blocks the light from the other direction, then you can remove reflections, because the light that is coming from that reflection is polarized in a certain way that it cannot travel through this lens. However, a surface is usually never fully polarized. So that's why I had to draw this again. So that's why we had to add a polarization filter to the light source as well. So the polarization here from this light is polarized in one direction, and then when it comes back to the light here, we can filter out everything but that direction. Something like that. Here are an illustration that shows what a polarization filter does. Basically, it blocks the light from certain angles to travel through, and only letting through light from one certain angle. So that's also why we will get a lot darker result when we are having polarization filters, because a lot of the light is just not coming through.
So here I have the polarization film, and I printed like a holder for that I can put on the flash. If you don't have the possibility to print this, I've shared this file for free. So if you have a 3D printer, you can print this one. If you don't have it, you can just basically cut this film manually and just tape it in front of the flash right here. So now I'll just place this on my flash, and now I made sure that all the light that is leaving the flash is polarized. And then here is the polarization lens that I use. This is from Case, but you can use whatever. Just make sure that you don't cheap out on this stuff, because the cheapest filters, they are not very good, and they can introduce issues with the sharpness and other, you know, all kinds of different artifacts in your images. So make sure that you buy some quality stuff. And now in order to calibrate this, I just use a Christmas ball so I can get some really nice reflections. And I'll turn on the light on the flash, so you can see now the LED light is turned on there, so I can see the reflection. And then on the camera, I'll just zoom in. So, oops, here you can see the reflection of the light, right there. And I'll just rotate this filter until the light disappears. You can see it's coming back now again, if I rotate like that. So there's a sweet spot where this filter on the flash is perfectly aligned with the filter on the lens, and now it kills all the reflections. You will still have reflections though from the table, from the tent, for example, or your environment. And if I take a photo, I can obviously still see the reflections of the tent here, but you can see when I zoom in here on the flash, there's no light. It's completely black. There's another benefit of doing this, and also a downside. The benefit is that since you're polarizing the light, you're also polarizing the reflections hitting the back of the image, the tent. So you can see now, if I zoom in, the back of the tent is completely black. So now I don't have to do much at all. I still might have to like drag down the blacks a little bit in the photos, but not very much. However, there is a downside of this as well, and that if I flip through the images here now, this is unpolarized, this is cross-polarized. You can tell the big difference. I have basically killed half of the light, and that's because all the light that is polarized in the direction that is opposite to what my lens is set to will be killed, is removed. It will not get through the lens. So here I have basically killed half of all the light, which means that I, in this case, have to crank up the ISO a little bit to 200. Or I could use a higher strength of the flash, but if I go more than to 1/4 of power, it will not be able to recharge before the next photo is triggering 1 second after. So 1/4 is the highest I can go. This works flawless. Well, not flawless, it works good. It works really good. So this setup is exactly the same setup as I used to make my first really high quality scans. So I will take it from here. I won't shoot this. I will use some old images that I shot with the same setup, take it into Agisoft, Metashape, and make a really nice model out of that. And after that, I will do some more adjustments to this setup, and I will try reality capture.